They did not yell when they told her to leave. That was the part that hurt the most. If they had screamed, accused, insulted her, she could have walked away angry. Anger is powerful. Anger burns clean and hot. But this was colder than winter steel. It was spoken over porcelain plates and folded napkins. "Naomi," her mother-in-law said gently, as if discussing table arrangements for church, "we think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else for a while." Somewhere else. The chandelier above the dining table glowed warmly, casting gold light over polished mahogany and crystal glasses. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and money. Everything in that room had been chosen carefully: imported curtains, Italian tile, framed degrees lining the hallway. It was a house that whispered legacy. Naomi had never belonged in rooms that whispered. She had married into them. Her husband, Daniel, sat beside her but did not touch her. His fingers remained wrapped around a glass of water. Condensation slid down the side, slow and deliberate. "For a while?" she asked quietly. Her voice didn't tremble. She was proud of that. Daniel cleared his throat. "Just until things settle. Settle. Like dust. Like scandal. Like embarrassment." She had been married to him for 3 years. 3 careful, smiling, obedient years. 3 years of trying to soften her accent when speaking at charity events. 3 years of learning which fork to use and how to sit without seeming too rural. 3 years of pretending she didn't notice when his mother introduced her as Daniel's wife. Naomi, she grew up outside the city. Outside the city. That was the polite way to say poor. The truth was uglier. Naomi had grown up in a single, wide trailer tucked into pine woods 2 counties over. Her father fixed engines for cash. Her mother sewed wedding dresses in the living room. They had love. They did not have marble countertops. She met Daniel at the university library while cleaning tables at night. He was kind then. Or perhaps he was curious. He liked that she was different. He said she was grounded, said she reminded him of something real. But real becomes inconvenient in certain families. Daniel's father finally spoke. "We warned you both," he said, voice low, controlled. "Business reputation matters. Investors talk. Our name matters." Naomi's stomach tightened. The article had come out 2 days ago, a speculative, poisonous piece implying Daniel's company had benefited from favorable contract influence because of Naomi's distant cousin who worked in local government. It wasn't true, but truth doesn't matter when the headline is good enough. Daniel's mother folded her hands. "You understand how this looks?" "Yes." She understood perfectly. They didn't believe she had done anything wrong. They believed she was a liability. Daniel still would not look at her. And that was when something inside her shifted. Not broke. Shifted. "I can leave tonight," she said. 3 faces lifted slightly, surprised at how easy she made it. Daniel finally turned. "Naomi, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. The word tasted metallic in her mouth. "I'm not," she replied softly. The silence stretched long enough to become its own verdict. She stood, smoothed the front of her simple navy dress, the one his mother once said was charming in a modest way. Then she walked upstairs to pack. She did not cry while folding her clothes. Crying is something you do when you believe someone might stop you. No one knocked on the door. No one followed. She packed 1 suitcase. She left the jewelry they had given her, left the delicate watch from their anniversary, left the diamond studs his mother had insisted would elevate her presence. She kept her grandmother's locket and her dignity. When she reached the front door, Daniel was waiting there. For 1 suspended second, she thought he might say it. "Stay, fight with me. We'll handle this together." Instead, he said, "Just until this blows over." She searched his face. He looked tired. Not heartbroken, not desperate, just inconvenienced. Naomi nodded once. Then she stepped outside. The door closed behind her with a sound softer than thunder and louder than anything she had ever heard. It was raining. Of course it was raining. She laughed once, short, disbelieving, as she rolled her suitcase down the long stone driveway. She had nowhere to go. Her parents' trailer had been sold after her father passed. Her mother now lived with her aunt in Arizona. Her bank account contained $30,1247. She did not call anyone. She walked. Half a mile down the road her phone buzzed. A text. From Daniel. "Let's keep things quiet for now. It's temporary." Temporary. Naomi stared at the word until the screen dimmed. Then she turned it off. By morning she was sitting inside a small town diner 40 miles away, wrapped in borrowed warmth and cheap coffee refills. The waitress didn't ask questions. Bless small towns. Naomi spread the local newspaper across the counter absent-mindedly, scanning rental listings she could not afford. And then she saw it, tiny, wedged between estate sale ads and farm equipment notices. Old logging cabin on Hollow Creek land. As is. Buyer responsible for relocation or restoration. 5 contact Harold Whitmore. She blinked. $5. It had to be a typo. But something about the words pulled at her chest. Logging cabin, Hollow Creek. She knew Hollow Creek. Her father used to take her fishing there when she was small. She remembered pine sap on her hands, the smell of damp earth, the sound of water against rock. It was quiet there. Unimpressed by wealth, unbothered by reputation, she stared at the listing for a long time. Then she borrowed the diner's phone. Harold Whitmore answered on the third ring. "Yes," she cleared her throat. "I'm calling about the cabin." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Didn't think anyone would. You serious?" "Yes. It's a wreck." "That's fine." Roof sagging, windows gone, been empty near 20 years. "That's fine. Land lease is dirt cheap, but you'll have to clear it yourself." Naomi looked down at her hands, calloused from childhood chores, softened by 3 years of careful living. "They want it gone," Harold continued. "Figured $5 makes it legal. $5. She had 3/1/12/47. She could buy it and still afford gas. "Can I see it today?" she asked. Another chuckle. "You're serious, Wes?" The cabin looked worse than she imagined. The road leading to it was barely a road, more suggestion than structure. Pine needles carpeted the ground thickly, muting her footsteps. When she stepped into the clearing, she stopped. It leaned slightly to the left, like an old man tired of standing. The porch had partially collapsed. The door hung crooked. Moss crept along the base logs. But the bones were strong. She could see that. Even through rot and neglect, the logs were thick, solid, hand-cut decades ago. The creek ran behind it, clear and steady. Sunlight filtered through trees in quiet beams. It was broken, but it was hers if she wanted it. Harold watched her carefully. Most folks laugh and leave. Naomi stepped forward, touching the rough wood. It was cold, real, unapologetic. She felt something rise in her chest. Not desperation, not escape, possibility. "I'll take it," she said. Harold blinked. "You don't even want to think." "I've thought enough." He studied her face, rain-dried hair, worn shoes, exhaustion sitting heavy in her eyes. Then he nodded slowly. $5. She handed him a crumpled bill from her wallet. The exchange felt ceremonial, ridiculous, and monumental. When Harold drove away, Naomi stood alone in the clearing. Wind moved softly through the trees. The cabin creaked faintly, like it was waking from a long sleep. She stepped inside. Dust swirled in the air. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight. There was no electricity, no plumbing, no furniture. But there was silence. No whispers about reputation. No polite smiles masking disapproval. No expectations. She set her suitcase down in the center of the room, and for the first time since the dinner table conversation, she allowed one tear to fall. Just one. Then she wiped it away. "All right," she whispered to the cabin. "It's you and me. Outside." The creek continued to run steady, unimpressed, unbothered, and somewhere deep within her, beneath humiliation, beneath fear, something stronger began to grow. Not revenge, not yet, but resolve. The first night in the cabin did not arrive gently. It fell. By late afternoon, the golden shafts of light that had filtered romantically through the trees began to thin. The forest shifted tone. Birds quieted. The air cooled fast in the way only wooded land can cool, sudden and absolute. Naomi stood in the center of the cabin, hands on her hips, surveying her kingdom of rot and dust. $5. She almost laughed again. The floor dipped slightly toward the far wall. There were old nail holes where shelves must have once hung. In one corner sat the rusted skeleton of what used to be a cast iron stove. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling beams like abandoned lace. This was not the kind of place you ran to. It was the kind of place you were forced into. And yet, she didn't feel forced. She felt stripped, stripped of expectation, stripped of polish, stripped of pretense. Her phone had no signal. That felt symbolic. She walked outside and dragged fallen branches toward the cabin. If she was staying, she would need fire. Growing up in the woods had not been glamorous, but it had been instructive. Her father's voice returned to her in memory. If you can build heat, you can build hope. She found an old metal barrel behind the cabin, dented but intact. It would do for now. She gathered dry pine needles and small twigs, building carefully, patiently. The first spark didn't catch. The second did. Flame rose cautiously, then steadied. The scent of smoke wrapped around her like something ancient and protective. Inside, darkness thickened. Without power, the interior sank into shadow quickly. She propped the crooked door partially open to allow firelight to spill across the floorboards. She sat on her suitcase. The reality settled heavier now. She had no bed, no water source besides the creek, no insulation beyond old timber, no husband, no plan. And for the first time since she'd walked away, doubt crept in. "What are you doing?" The thought arrived sharp and reasonable. You had a house, stability, a life. You could have stayed quiet. Let them handle it. Waited until it blew over. She imagined the dining table again, the chandelier, the polished silver, Daniel's careful tone. Temporary. Would it have been temporary? Or would she have returned smaller, more careful, more grateful for the chance to be tolerated? The fire popped loudly, snapping her from the spiral. She stood abruptly and began clearing debris inside the cabin. Movement silenced doubt. Her hands needed purpose. She swept dust into a pile using a broken plank as a makeshift broom. She pushed aside rotted fabric remains in the corner. Beneath layers of neglect, the wood floor revealed itself, scarred but solid. Solid. That word mattered. As she cleared near the far wall, her foot caught on something uneven beneath a loose board. She crouched and pried it upward carefully. Underneath, she found a small tin box. It was old, green paint chipped, hinges rusted. She stared at it for a moment before opening it. Inside were folded papers, yellowed, fragile, and a key. Her breath slowed. She unfolded the first paper carefully. It wasn't money. It wasn't treasure. It was a blueprint, roughly sketched, measurements, notes, additions marked in pencil, plans for expanding the cabin. Her heart thudded. There were notes scribbled in faded ink. Future loft here. Porch extension west side for sunset. Run force beams, good bones, good bones. She whispered the phrase aloud. The handwriting changed on the last page. A different pen. Different pressure. Didn't finish. Maybe someone will. The air shifted in the room. Maybe someone will. She looked around slowly. At the beams. At the ceiling height. At the open space behind the cabin where the creek curved wide. Something ignited. Not survival. Vision. What if this wasn't just shelter? What if this was foundation? She laughed, but this time it wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. Her father had once built a shed from scraps and turned it into the most functional workshop in the county. People had mocked him at first. They stopped laughing when they needed repairs. Naomi ran her hand over the blueprint again. This cabin had been someone's dream, abandoned before completion. She understood unfinished dreams. Outside, wind moved stronger through the trees. The temperature dropped further. She would need to sleep soon, and it would not be comfortable. She gathered pine needles and layered them thickly along one cleared corner of the floor. On top, she spread her coat. It would have to be enough. Before lying down, she stepped outside once more. The forest at night was different from daytime beauty. It was deep, infinite, unconcerned. Stars burned sharp above the tree line. No city glow, no polished illusion, just vast, honest dark. She inhaled slowly. For the first time since the dinner table, she didn't feel small. She felt unknown. And unknown can be powerful. Back inside, she placed the tin box beside her makeshift bedding. She held the small key up to the firelight. What did it open? There had been no locked doors here. She scanned the interior again. Then her gaze lifted to the ceiling beams. Loft. The blueprint mentioned a loft. There was a section of ceiling where boards were newer, replaced at some point. She stood, ignoring exhaustion, and dragged an old crate beneath that section. Carefully, she climbed. The wood above shifted slightly under pressure. She pushed harder. One plank loosened. Dust rained down, and behind it, a narrow cavity. She reached in slowly. Her fingers brushed metal. She pulled out a small, locked wooden case. The key. Her pulse quickened. She climbed down carefully and sat cross-legged near the fire barrel. The key slid into the lock with surprising smoothness. She hesitated. Not out of fear. Out of awareness. This moment mattered. Then she turned it. Click. Inside the case were photographs. Black and white images of the cabin decades earlier. But not broken. Finished. Expanded. There was a wide porch, flower boxes under windows, smoke rising from a proper chimney. And people. A family. Smiling, alive in the space. Her throat tightened. At the bottom of the case lay a leather-bound journal. She opened to the first page. Built this place with my hands. Figured I'd leave something real behind. Something that doesn't answer to banks or boardrooms. She froze. Boardrooms. The words felt almost pointed. She read deeper. It was written by a man named Thomas Whitmore, Harold's father, likely. He wrote about carving logs himself. About choosing land near water. About wanting independence from men who measure worth in stock numbers. Naomi's chest tightened further. The final entry was dated 23 years ago. Business failed. Had to move. Couldn't keep it. Maybe someone will find this and finish what I started. If you're reading this, build it better. Build it better. The fire crackled low. Her eyes burned not from smoke. Build it better. They had removed her from a house obsessed with reputation. What if she built something that didn't care about reputation at all? What if she created something that measured worth differently? Her mind began to calculate. Tourism near Hollow Creek had increased slightly in recent years. People from the city rented rustic spaces for disconnect weekends. She had seen the listings. Rustic authenticity. $5 investment. Land lease cheap. Labor-free if she did it herself. Her father's old tools were still stored in a small locker in town. She had paid the storage fee yearly without knowing why she couldn't let them go. Now she knew. Her exhaustion transformed into alertness. This wasn't exile. This was ground zero. The insult at the dinner table had not destroyed her. It had relocated her. She stood slowly in the dim cabin. "I'll finish it," she whispered. The forest did not answer. It didn't need to. She lay down on pine needles and coat, journal resting against her chest. Cold crept in around her edges, but inside something burned steady and hot. They had expected her to retreat quietly, disappear until convenient. Instead, she had bought forgotten land and inherited unfinished ambition. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was not filled with dining tables and chandeliers. It was filled with hammer strikes, sawdust and sunlight, wood beams rising, and a porch facing west where the sun would set in full, unapologetic fire. Naomi woke before sunrise. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Her back ached. Her fingers were stiff from cold. The scent of smoke clung to her hair. Then she opened her eyes to raw timber beams and pale blue dawn filtering through broken window frames. And she remembered. The humiliation, the $5 bill, the blueprint, the journal. Build it better. She sat up slowly, breath visible in the cold air. The fire barrel had reduced to embers. Outside, the creek moved steadily, indifferent to human drama. She stepped outside and washed her face in the freezing water, gasping as it shocked her awake. It felt honest. It felt earned. This would not be comfortable, but it would be hers. By 8 in the morning, she was in town. Hollow Creek Township had not changed much in 10 years. The hardware store still had a bell above the door that rang too loud. The diner still served biscuits the size of fists. When she stepped into Whitaker's hardware, conversation slowed. Small towns recognize outsiders instantly. They also remember their own. Whitaker squinted at her. "You look familiar." "Naomi Ellis," she said automatically, then paused. Ellis, her maiden name. It felt strange and solid in her mouth. Ray Ellis's girl. Whitaker's face softened immediately. "Well, I'll be." Naomi nodded once. "I heard you married into money," someone muttered near the back. She ignored it. "I need tools," Naomi said simply. "Basic lumber supplies, roofing tarp nails, weather seal, and I'll need to know who's got a ladder tall enough for a 2-story pitch." The store went quiet again. Mrs. Whitaker leaned forward slightly. "What are you fixing?" "The Whitmore cabin." The reaction was immediate. A low whistle. A few exchanged looks. "That place is near falling over." "I bought it." Silence. "For how much?" Someone dollars. That broke the tension. Laughter rippled through the store. But Naomi didn't smile. "I'm restoring it." The laughter faded. Whitaker studied her carefully. "Alone, Wes?" There was something in Naomi's eyes that morning that hadn't been there when she was 17 and leaving town for college. Something harder. Mrs. Whitaker nodded slowly. "You'll need more than nails." "I know. And you'll need help." Naomi held her gaze. "I'll pay." Mrs. Whitaker surprised her by shaking her head. Not everything costs money. By noon, she had borrowed a ladder, rented basic equipment on deferred payment, and secured a promise from old Mr. Talley, retired contractor, to least look at the foundation so you don't kill yourself. Word traveled fast. By the time she drove back down the near invisible road toward the cabin in a borrowed pickup truck full of supplies, 3 different people had already texted her asking if she was serious. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The first hammer strike echoed strangely through the trees. It felt ceremonial. Naomi stood on the sagging porch, ripping away rotted boards one by one. Each plank she pulled loose felt symbolic, like tearing off old expectations. Sweat formed quickly despite the cold air. Her palms blistered fast, soft skin protesting labor it hadn't felt in years. Good. Let it protest. By mid-afternoon, she had stripped the porch entirely and braced the front beam temporarily. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't elegant. But it stood straighter. Tally arrived just before sunset, walking slowly with hands clasped behind his back. He circled the cabin once, twice, grunted. "The bones are good," he finally said. Naomi exhaled softly. "Foundation stone, not concrete. But it settled well. Logs are old-growth pine. Stronger than anything you'd buy now." He looked at her sideways. "Why are you doing this?" She didn't answer immediately. "Because I was asked to leave. Because I wasn't enough. Because I'm tired of rooms that whisper." "Instead," she said, "because it deserves to stand." He studied her for a long moment. "Your daddy would have liked that answer." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. He nodded once. "I'll come by tomorrow. Bring my tools." "Thank you."
"Don't thank me yet. I'm ornery." A faint smile touched her mouth. "I remember."
That night, she slept warmer. Exhaustion wrapped around her fully now, earned and heavy. Before lying down, she opened Thomas Whitmore's journal again. She flipped toward the middle entries. There were sketches of porch rails, notes about guest rooms, a line written boldly across one page: "Make it a place people can breathe." Naomi traced the ink with her finger. Breathe. She thought of Daniel's house. No one breathed there. They performed. Days blended quickly into rhythm. Morning at the creek. Daylight repairs. Evening firelight planning. Mr. Talley kept his word. He corrected her angles, showed her how to reinforce beams properly, explained load distribution like he was teaching a college course.
You don't just patch,
he said one afternoon. You strengthen, or it fails again. The words felt larger than wood. By the end of week 1, the cabin no longer leaned. By week 2, the roof was temporarily sealed. By week 3, she had framed the beginnings of a loft exactly where the blueprint had suggested. Word spread beyond town. Photos appeared online. Someone had posted a picture of her working on the roof, captioned, "Ray Ellis's girl rebuilding Whitmore's ghost cabin." Comments multiplied, some mocking, some impressed. One comment stood out. "Would rent this when it's done." Naomi stared at that for a long time. Would rent this. An idea sharpened further. What if it wasn't just restoration?
No marble countertops, no chandeliers.
Just creek water, firelight, real air, digital detox weekends. She had spent 3 years attending networking events, listening to investors, understanding what wealthy city couples craved when they were tired of themselves. Escape. Irony almost made her laugh. They had exiled her to the woods, and she was about to monetize the woods. On the 24th day, her phone finally caught signal at the top of the ridge near the property. 3 voicemails, one from an unknown number, one from a journalist, one from Daniel. Her stomach tightened slightly. She listened to his last. "Naomi, I've been trying to reach you. The article's dying down. We can talk about you coming back. Mom and Dad think it might be time to resolve things." Resolve things. As if she were paperwork. He paused. "I heard something strange. About you buying some place out there. I hope that's not true." "Call me." She stared at the trees. "Hope that's not true." A strange calm filled her. She didn't call back. Instead, she walked down to the cabin and lifted another beam into place. The journalist voicemail was more interesting. "Hi, Naomi. I'm with State Living magazine. We're doing a feature on rural revitalization projects. Someone mentioned you're restoring the Whitmore cabin. I'd love to talk." Her pulse quickened. Visibility. She sat slowly on the new porch frame, not yet finished but steady. 3 weeks ago she had been politely removed from a mansion. Now a magazine wanted to interview her about rebuilding something abandoned. Life has strange symmetry. She looked around at the clearing, now partially leveled, at the reinforced beams, at the outline of the future loft. It was still rough, still raw, but no longer forgotten. That evening, as the sun set exactly where the blueprint had predicted it would shine best, she stood on the skeletal porch frame and watched gold light spill across the creek. She imagined guests sitting here, laughing softly, breathing. She imagined the cabin lit warmly against dusk. She imagined booking calendars filling. She imagined building not one but several. A retreat, a brand, a statement, not revenge, elevation. And somewhere miles away, in a polished dining room that suddenly felt smaller than before, Daniel's mother set down her phone slowly after reading the same online article headline draft the journalist had posted as teasered. Abandoned cabin reborn by local woman after high-profile marriage exit. The family name was not mentioned, but they recognized her face immediately. Daniel stared at the photo longer than the others. She was covered in sawdust, hair tied back, sun on her cheek, and she looked alive, more alive than he had seen her in years. His father's jaw tightened. "This will attract attention," he muttered. Yes, it would, but not the kind they expected. That night, Naomi lit the fire again and opened the journal to a blank page at the back. She picked up a pencil, and she wrote, "Didn't get kicked out. Got redirected. This place won't just stand, it will rise." She closed the book gently. Outside, the forest shifted with quiet approval. The cabin no longer felt abandoned. It felt like beginning. The article went live on a Thursday morning. Naomi didn't see it immediately. She was on the roof, balancing carefully as she secured the final ridge cap into place. Her arms ached in the way that only repetitive effort creates, deep, earned soreness that felt less like pain and more like proof. Below her, Mr. Talley shaded his eyes. "You're getting quicker," he called. "I'm getting stubborn," she called back. He laughed. When she climbed down, sweat, damp and streaked with sawdust, her phone buzzed repeatedly from the tailgate of the truck. No missed calls this time. Notifications. She wiped her hands on her jeans and opened the screen. There it was. State Living magazine online feature. From society tables to timber beams, local woman rebuilds abandoned cabin into woodland escape. Her photo filled the top banner, sunlight behind her. Hammer mid-swing. Expression focused, not posed. She read the article slowly. It didn't frame her as disgraced. It framed her as bold, It mentioned nothing about scandal, only a high-profile separation from city life and a return to roots. Return to roots. She smiled faintly. Then her email began to flood. Subject line stacked quickly. Is this place available for rent? Retreat booking inquiry. Weekend getaway pricing. Investor interest. Investor interest. She sat down on the edge of the unfinished porch and let the reality settle. This wasn't just attention. This was demand. The first direct message came through social media. A couple from the city. Overworked attorneys. Looking for somewhere without Wi-Fi, where we can hear ourselves think. She looked up at the trees swaying overhead. You can hear everything here, she thought. She hesitated only a moment before replying. Opening date in 6 weeks, 1 cabin, limited availability, rustic experience. No Wi-Fi, wood heat, creek access, sunset porch. She paused, then added, 600 per weekend. She stared at the number. It felt outrageous, and yet, it was cheaper than one night in the kind of hotel she used to attend. Gallus Inn. The reply came within 10 minutes. We'll take it. Her breath caught, just like that. $600. The cabin had cost $5. She looked down at her hands, blistered, rough, capable. Value was shifting. By the end of that week, she had 4 confirmed bookings, all for dates after projected completion. She had not even installed proper windows yet, but something about the story sold before the structure did. People weren't buying a cabin. They were buying transformation. Mr. Talley shook his head when she told him, "You're charging how much?" 600. For no electricity. For peace. He studied her for a long moment. "Your daddy had hustle," he muttered. "You've got strategy." Money began to move differently after that. She reinvested everything. Proper insulation, energy-efficient windows, a handcrafted wood-burning stove, solar panels discreetly placed behind the cabin line. She didn't want modern to overpower rustic. She wanted harmony. She worked harder than she ever had inside marble walls. But exhaustion now felt like construction, not survival. One afternoon, as she was installing railing posts, a black SUV rolled slowly down the dirt road. It didn't belong. City tires on forest ground. Her spine stiffened. The vehicle stopped near the clearing. Daniel stepped out. He wore pressed slacks, polished shoes now dusted with pine powder. He looked around as if expecting someone to pop out and reveal the joke. There was no joke. She stood upright, hammer in hand. "You found it," she said evenly.
"This is real?" he asked. "Yes."
He looked at the reinforced beams, the newly installed windows, the porch frame that now stood proud and level.
You're living here.
Yes. Hiss.
His jaw tightened. "Nami, this has gotten out of hand." She almost smiled. Out of hand. She stepped closer, but not too close. "No," she said calmly. "It's finally in my hands." He looked at her properly then, at the strength in her shoulders, the steadiness in her gaze. "You could come back," he said. "The board situation is stabilizing. The article about you is circulating."
People are talking.
"Good," she replied.
That's not what I mean.
"I know." Wind moved between them. He lowered his voice. "My parents are concerned." She held his eyes. "Are you?" Silence stretched. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. "You should go," she said gently. "This isn't who you are." He tried again. She looked around at the trees, at the structure rising from effort. "You never knew who I was," she replied. He hesitated as if wanting to argue, but he had no blueprint for this version of her. He got back into the SUV. As it disappeared down the dirt road, Naomi didn't feel triumph. She felt clarity. That evening, she raised the final support beam for the loft, and it held. By month 2, the cabin was unrecognizable. The exterior logs were cleaned and resealed, rich honey tones glowing under sunlight. The porch stretched westward exactly as the blueprint promised. Flower boxes bloomed beneath new windows. Inside, the loft stood solid above the main room. A handcrafted ladder led upward to a queen mattress layered with thick wool blankets. She installed a deep copper-soaking tub beside a large window overlooking the creek, her one indulgence. If they're going to pay for breath, she thought, they might as well soak in it. Bookings doubled after she posted interior photos. Then tripled. She raised the price to $850 per weekend. No cancellations. Instead, a waitlist. She began branding it. Hollow Creek Cabin, reclaim your quiet. The tagline spread quickly. She hired a local college student to manage inquiries, paid him fairly. Mr. Talley became unofficial maintenance advisor. Mrs. Whitaker started sending guests homemade bread baskets for a small fee. The town was benefiting, and they knew it. One morning, Harold Whitmore himself showed up. He stood on the finished porch, stunned. "My daddy would have cried," he said quietly. Naomi handed him the restored journal.
"I found this."
He turned pages slowly, eyes softening. "You finished it," he murmured. "No," she said gently. "I built it better." He nodded, unable to argue. Then he surprised her. "There's 2 more structures further down the creek," he said. "Old storage sheds, Same land lease if you want them. Her heart began to pound. Expansion. She thought of the demand, of the waitlist, of city couples desperate for silence. I want them, she said without hesitation. Back in the city, Daniel's family watched headlines evolve. Lifestyle bloggers picked up the story. Socialite turns wilderness architect. Chabon built on 5-of bet now booking out months ahead. Investors began asking questions not about scandal, but about opportunity. Daniel's father frowned at the screen one evening. She's becoming a brand. Daniel said nothing, but he noticed something else. In every photo she stood straighter, freer, and dangerously independent. Naomi hired 3 local carpenters by month 3. She formalized her LLC, opened a business account, spoke to a financial advisor, not from Daniel's circle, but recommended by Mr. Talley's niece. Revenue projections were conservative but strong. She reinvested aggressively. Cabin 2 would be slightly larger, family-friendly. Cabin 3 more secluded, designed for writers and artists, each with its own personality, each rooted in that same phrase, build it better. The first guests arrived on a crisp Friday evening. Naomi did not hover. She greeted them warmly, showed them the stove operation, pointed toward the sunset view. Then she left them alone. At dawn the next morning, she walked quietly near the clearing and saw them sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets, coffee steaming in hand. They were not speaking. They were just watching the creek, and they looked peaceful. Something inside her settled deeply. This was not revenge. This was restoration for herself and for strangers. By Sunday evening, they left a handwritten note on the kitchen table. We haven't felt this close in years. Thank you. Naomi held the note for a long time. She understood then. They had kicked her out thinking they were protecting a legacy. Instead, they had freed her to create one. 3 months later, Hollow Creek cabin revenue crossed 6 figures. 6 figures. She stood on the porch at sunset, wind lifting her hair, and let the number sink in. From $5. From exile. From polite dismissal. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a different message. From Daniel. I didn't understand before. I do now. We need to talk. She looked out at Cabin 2's foundation being laid in the distance. Talk. The word felt smaller than before. She typed slowly. I'm busy building. Then she turned her phone off. The sun dipped below the trees in full, unapologetic fire, and Hollow Creek glowed. By the time the leaves turned copper and gold, Hollow Creek was no longer a project. It was a destination. Cabin 1 booked 6 months out. Cabin 2 was fully operational before winter. Cabin 3, tucked deeper into the trees near a bend in the creek, became a favorite among writers and newlyweds who wanted quiet without interruption. Naomi stopped thinking in terms of survival. She started thinking in terms of vision. She expanded the concept carefully, not fast, not greedy, intentional. A small open-air pavilion for seasonal workshops, a long communal table carved from reclaimed pine for once-a-month dinners under string lights, partnerships with local artisans, pottery mugs stamped with Hollow Creek cabin, woven blankets, handmade soaps infused with cedar and lavender. Every detail was deliberate. No marble, no chandeliers, no performance, just warmth. Revenue crossed 7 figures before the year ended. 7 from $5. Investors began approaching her aggressively now. Venture capital emails, hospitality groups offering buyouts, scale nationally, franchise opportunity, luxury wilderness chain. She read every proposal and declined every one. Hollow Creek wasn't about scale. It was about intention. The irony did not escape her. The same world that had dismissed her was now trying to acquire her. Back in the city, Daniel's family watched her name circulate in business publications. Not gossip columns. Business. From rejection to rural empire, the woman who rebuilt her own fortune. Daniel's father read the headline twice. He had built his company over decades, carefully, strategically. But this was narrative power. And narrative power attracted something far stronger than investors. Respect. One evening, Daniel showed up again. Not in an SUV this time. He drove himself. No polished speech prepared. He stood at the edge of the clearing as guests laughed softly under lantern light. Naomi approached calmly. You look well, he said.
I am.
He glanced around at the cabins glowing in warm amber against the trees. I underestimated you. Yes, she said gently. You did. Silence stretched, but it wasn't painful. It was honest. I thought you'd come back, he admitted. She tilted her head slightly. Why? Because it was easier. She smiled faintly. Easy was never the goal. He exhaled slowly. My parents want to meet with you. She studied him carefully. For what? Partnership. Public reconciliation, something mutually beneficial. There it was. Transaction. Even now, Naomi's expression did not harden, it clarified. I don't need reconciliation, she said.
And I don't need partnership. They see potential.
She nodded.
So do I, but not with them.
Daniel looked at her for a long moment, truly looked. I didn't stand up for you. he said quietly.
No, she replied. I should have.
Yes.
The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the scent of cedar smoke. I'm sorry, he added, and for the first time she believed him. But apology and return are not the same thing. I forgive you, she said calmly. That was all. No more, no less. He left shortly after, and this time she did not watch the car disappear. She turned back toward the cabins, toward laughter and firelight and something alive. The official invitation arrived 2 weeks later, a charity gala in the city, hosted by Daniel's Family Foundation. She was invited as founder and CEO of Hollow Creek Retreat. The wording was deliberate, respectful, strategic. Naomi stared at the embossed card for a long time. Going back meant walking into the room that once closed behind her. But she wasn't the same woman, and the room wasn't the same either. She accepted. The night of the gala she did not wear borrowed diamonds. She wore a simple forest green gown. Elegant structure, confident. Her grandmother's locket rested at her collarbone. When she stepped into the ballroom, conversation shifted almost instantly. Not because of scandal, because of success. People recognized her. Whispers carried not judgment, but curiosity. Daniel's mother approached first, impeccable as always, controlled but older somehow.
Naomi,
she said softly. Whitmore, a small pause.
you've done something extraordinary.
Thank you. Her mother-in-law hesitated before continuing. We'll misjudge the situation. Naomi held her gaze.
You misjudge me.
A breath. Yes. Across the room, Daniel's father approached. Pride and calculation wore subtly in his posture. You've built something impressive, he said. Sustainable revenue, strong brand loyalty, emotional positioning. She almost smiled at the analysis. You taught your son to measure worth in numbers, she said calmly. I learned to measure it in impact. He did not argue. Because he couldn't. Guests gathered as speeches began. Near the end of the evening, the host made an unexpected announcement. And tonight, we honor an entrepreneur who redefined resilience. Naomi froze slightly. Daniel's father stepped aside from the podium. Naomi Ellis Whitmore. The use of her maiden name first did not go unnoticed. Applause filled the ballroom. She walked to the stage slowly, gracefully. She did not rush. When she reached the microphone, she did not look at Daniel. She looked at the room. A year ago, she began, voice steady. I was asked to leave a house I thought was my future. Silence deepened. I believed at the time that I was losing everything. A breath. But I wasn't losing anything. She paused. I was being redirected. A ripple moved through the crowd. Sometimes rejection isn't exile. It's exposure. Exposure to who you actually are when comfort is removed. She let that settle.
I built cabins.
Yes, but what I really built was proof. That worth isn't granted by invitation. It's built by intention. The room held still. And if there's anything I've learned, it's this: when someone closes a door, don't beg. Build your own house. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was real. Daniel's mother blinked rapidly. Daniel's father nodded once, not as a superior, as an equal. A year later, Hollow Creek was featured in architectural journals, travel magazines, business podcasts. Naomi expanded, not outward recklessly, but deeper intentionally. She created a foundation that funded rural women entrepreneurs. She mentored young builders from small towns who felt invisible. She bought the land outright, no leases, ownership. And on the anniversary of the day she bought the cabin for $5, she hosted a community dinner under the pavilion lights. Mr. Talley raised a glass. To good bones, he said. Everyone laughed. Naomi stood afterward alone on the original porch, the one she rebuilt first. The sunset burned gold across the creek. Cabins glowed warm behind her. Guests' voices carried softly in the distance. She thought about the night the door closed behind her. The rain, the suitcase, the silence. If they hadn't asked her to leave, she might still be sitting at that long dining table, careful, contained, waiting for permission to breathe. Instead, she owned acres of forest, a thriving business, a name separate from anyone else's legacy. Her phone buzzed gently. A notification. Forbes 40 under 40 nominee. She laughed softly. $5. She traced the wood railing with her fingers. Build it better. She had. And what it became wasn't revenge. It wasn't even success. It was freedom. The kind that doesn't need approval. The kind that doesn't wait for doors to open. The kind that builds its own. As the sun dipped fully below the trees, Naomi stood tall on the porch of the cabin that cost $5 and was worth millions, not just in money, but in meaning. And somewhere, in a mansion that suddenly felt much smaller than before, a family finally understood what they had tried to discard. They hadn't kicked her out. They had set her loose.